The church today celebrates the beheading of St. John the Baptist, and St. John the Baptist is called by the Lord the greatest man who was ever born of woman. And if you look, for example, on the temblon, on the iconostasis of every Orthodox church, the Holy Virgin is always at the right hand of Christ, and on the left is always St. John the Baptist. And this expresses how St. John the Baptist played a vital role in every single aspect of Christ's life. And he's given many titles. He's the seal of the prophets. He's the greatest man ever born of woman. He's the Baptist, of course. But I think the title most relevant to today's feast is that of the Forerunner, Prodromos. Because just as the Virgin Mary became the ladder by which God descended to earth, the Forerunner, John the Baptist, was the one who then prepared the way that he would walk on the earth. The Virgin Mary, she is the gate through which the King enters our world, but it's St. John the Baptist who stands there to receive him and to greet him as the ambassador of humanity. And just as the Virgin Mary marks the beginning of Christ's human life, St. John the Baptist marks the beginning of his ministry, of his interaction with mankind. And also in his death, St. John is the forerunner. And so the role he played in life, he also plays in death. And so he precedes Christ. He goes first into Hades, into the realm of the dead, in order to preach Christ to the souls of the dead, so that when Christ died on the cross and ascended into hell, the people there would be ready to receive him. And St. John again would stand there at the gates of hell to greet Christ and to receive him again as the ambassador of humanity. And one of the hymns of Vespers actually describes this as a festal occasion. Although death, the means by which John died was brutal and gruesome, and the events leading up to his death were evil. But the church sees this day as a cause of celebration. It says, dress in bright clothing and rejoice, something like that in the Vesper service. And so, because this feast is a prelude, is an introduction in a way to Christ's saving work on the cross. And so if it's an occasion for joy, if it's a feast, why then is it a strict fasting day? And the answer is that we don't fast to mourn the death of John the Baptist, but we fast to remember Herod, because it was his lack of sobriety that led to the evil that he committed. And so we devote this day to chastity and to abstinence and to self-control, in order that we don't fall into the same temptations as King Herod, who, on account of what he allowed himself to see, and on account of his intoxication by drinking too much and so on, found himself in a state where he was led completely into sin, even a sin that he didn't actually want to commit. Herod didn't want to kill John because he was afraid of the people, and he recognized that John was a holy man. But because he surrendered himself entirely to sin, his passions carried him away with him. And of course the key virtue that we strive for through fasting and through asceticism is the virtue that characterizes John the Baptist, which is humility. He says, before the coming of Christ, I must decrease so that he can increase. And this is something that applies to all of us. We must decrease, we must humble ourselves so that Christ can increase within us. And it was ultimately pride that led to John's death, because Herod's wife, she, on account of her pride, when she was rebuked by John for her sin, instead of turning inwards and targeting her sin and looking to destroy sin, she targeted the person who pricked her conscience. She wanted to destroy the truth instead of destroy the sin in herself. And Herod as well, when he had made the promise to the girl, he still had a chance to repent. He could still have changed his mind. But because he was so proud, he didn't want to go back on his word, and he didn't want to embarrass himself in front of his friends. He again went ahead and did something that he knew was wrong. And so this is the key passion and the key fall that we are called to avoid. And so this is why this day is devoted to fasting, despite the fact that the event of St. John's descent into Hades is the prelude to a joyous occasion. And we should also remember the reason why John was killed. Unlike the other martyrs, he wasn't asked to deny Christ. He wasn't asked to embrace some kind of heretical dogma or to change his faith. He was just asked to be quiet about the sin of the king. He was killed simply because he spoke out about God's law regarding marriage and what was right and what was wrong. And what that tells us is that there's no aspect of life that we can keep outside of the church. When it comes to truth, there can be no compromise. We can change and we can adapt in terms of the way that we relate to people, the way that we try to approach people and embrace people and reach them with the gospel of salvation. But in terms of the truth itself, there's no category of dogmatic truth which is rigid and permanent, and moral truth which is changeable and flexible and malleable. Truth is truth, and the church doesn't make these arbitrary distinctions. What God has revealed is important, even if it's something that we may relegate to the personal realm. The church's approach to truth is holistic, and it's not divided into arbitrary sort of categories of this is a moral question, and this is a dogmatic question, and this is but everything that pertains to Christ and everything that Christ has revealed is part of the same whole and part of the same truth. And that's why even what seemingly was a minor thing, it was something concerning the king's life, John considered it important enough to die for, confessing that the truth on that particular matter. And so we should all pray on this day of fasting to emulate St. John in his courage, in his conviction, his loyalty to the truth, and his sobriety and his continence.